and welcome to Tête à Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest today is Danny Danon. He is Israel's new ambassador to the United Nations, and he joins us from New York just a few days before the UN General Assembly. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Israel has now made the safe return of residents to the north of the country an official war goal, according to the Prime Minister's office. Does this mean that war with Hezbollah is all but certain?
Mark, for almost a year, the residents in the north had to leave their homes, their schools, their businesses, and live like refugees in their own country. We have said numerous times, it will not continue forever. We are still trying diplomatic channels in order to allow them to come back to their communities. But at the end of the day, the government has a responsibility to protect its citizens. That is why we are very clear about this message. We will bring them back, either through diplomatic channels, or there will be no other choice. We will use our capabilities in order to secure the safety of our citizens. I still hope that something will happen, but if we will not see any progress, there is some point in life where you have to put a red line and understand that you have to take action. We are getting close to that moment.
Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar said just a few days ago that his group was ready for a long battle of attrition against Israel and that Hamas still had lots of resources to sustain its fight. He's right?
Absolutely not. Yahya Sinwar is hiding like a coward in the tunnels behind civilians. We know that the infrastructure of Hamas was destroyed, not completely, but heavily destroyed. The capabilities are very low now, and we are determined. We are determined to finish the job, to find Sinwar, to capture or kill him, and we will make sure that those who planned the murder, the butchering, the massacre of October 7 will pay the price. We are getting close to that, but we all know that he's using civilians to hide behind them, but we will get him.
When Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas comes to New York for the UN General Assembly in a few days, he will be for the first time seated on the floor of the General Assemblies, among other UN member states. This is because of a resolution passed by the General Assembly in May granting Palestinians some additional rights. Why is this a problem for Israel?
You know, I don't think that is the most important point, but I'm bothered from another point. President Abbas never condemned the atrocities of October 7. We always speak about the distinction between the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. You know, since the October 7, not one official from the Palestinian Authority condemned Hamas. So I'm worried about that, whether he will come and he would say what we expect him to say, that he condemned the atrocities, that he called for the release of the hostages. I'm not sure he would say that. That's what's important for us. Less where he will be seated or not seated. This is a circus, the General Assembly, so it doesn't matter where you sit in the circus.
Right. There are also resolutions being discussed to sanction Israel, even an arms embargo. Is Israel prepared to retaliate, maybe against the Palestinian Authority, financially or even by stopping security cooperation if such a resolution is pushed and passed?
So what we are seeing that the Palestinians are working in two fronts. In one front, Hamas conduct terror attacks against Israel. On the other front, the Palestinian Authority, they conduct what I call diplomatic terrorism. They try to isolate Israel, to slander Israel. It's not going to bring them anywhere. They should understand and realize that we are here to stay, and we prove that we are able to negotiate peace and achieve peace agreements. We did it with many, many countries, and God's will, we will do it with more countries in the future. But for the Palestinians, it's much easier to come to the UN, pass empty resolutions against Israel, instead of actually deal with the incitement and think about progress and future for the region.
Right. In addition to proceedings against Israel before the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, 3 Western countries, Norway, Spain, Ireland, have recognized the state of Palestine. The UK, Germany, and France, not yet. It seems that Israel is becoming more and more isolated on the international scene.
Well, I call it the game of a different planet of the UN. There is reality, and you have the planet of the UN. You can play that game. But when you see what's happening today with the Palestinians, the lack of leadership, the lack of accountability, the fact that Hamas is being supported by the population, I think that is the main issue we need to address. And we are peaceful. As I said earlier, Mark, we prove that we mean business when we speak about peace. But once you have a regime that is not capable to condemn what we suffered 11 months ago, every Israeli is asking himself with whom we should have a peace treatment, a peace agreement. With whom? With those who support the Hamas? It's not going to happen unless the Palestinian Authority will decide to abandon terror, condemn terror, and think about a new path.
The UN Secretary General again called Israel to stop what he calls the collective punishment in Gaza. This brings the question about Israel's goal in Gaza. Is it to reoccupy, even resettle Gaza, as some ministers have indicated in Israel?
First of all, allow me to correct the statement of the Secretary General. There is no collective punishment. If it was that case, it wouldn't have taken us 11 months. Believe me, we have the power and the capability. Because we are doing our best to minimize the casualties for civilians, it takes us so long to finish the job and to capture the leadership of Hamas. And we are doing everything we can to minimize the damages for civilians. But it's hard when you have terrorists who are hiding behind civilians. That is the most important point for us.
But are you going to reoccupy and resettle Gaza in the future? Yes or no?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know, we've said it clearly. We have no intention to stay in Gaza. Our goals are very clear. We want to bring back the hostages. They were kidnapped from their homes, babies, women, children. We want to bring them back and to dismantle Hamas. After that, we want the people of Gaza to administer their own life by themselves, and hopefully it will be a peaceful neighbor. But we understand that for that to happen, we first have to finish the job and eliminate Hamas.
The UN Secretary General also called totally unacceptable a recent raid by Israel against a UN school operating as a shelter where 18 people were killed. The UN said 6 among them were workers for UNRA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Israel denies what Mr. Guterres has to say. Why? Why don't you trust what the UN Secretary General says?
Well, you have facts. You know, we approached UNRWA right after the incident that took place in Gaza, and we asked them to submit the names of those UNRWA workers that were targeted. We haven't got any names. So we did the research ourselves, and we found out that those were not aid workers. They were terrorists. And I exposed in the Security Council the names of those terrorists who had a day job with UNRWA and a night job with Hamas. So those are not aid workers. Those are terrorists, and we will hunt them down. And I think it's an insult for the other aid workers who are doing work in Gaza to make that connection. But it's not the first time that we found out that UNRWA Gaza was infiltrated by Hamas and controlled by Hamas.
Do you want to terminate UNRWA despite all the work they do to help children and others survive in Gaza?
So we work with those agencies who actually do what they're supposed to do, support humanitarian efforts.
UNRWA is not?
UNRWA, unfortunately, is not. You know, they became a political wing, dealing with advocacy, attacking Israel, and as we proved, many UNRWA workers are involved with Hamas. So I think it is about time to think about another option, other agencies to do the work. You know, they have been there for so many years, and no one saw real results on the ground. Think about the billions of dollars that were spent through UNRWA over the years, and what was the reality after that.
Right. What about the humanitarian situation? I mean, we've seen tens of thousands of casualties. Also, the issue of starvation. Israel keeps saying, no, there's no problem of humanitarian aid delivery. But top UN official says there is such a problem. People are food insecure in Gaza, and mostly because of what Israel is doing and or not allowing them to do.
First of all, there is suffering. No one can ignore that, both in Israel and in Gaza. But the blame for that is on the shoulder of Hamas. They are the one who started this war. It was an unprovoked attack against our communities. They are the one who kidnapped the hostages. So the blame is on Hamas. Now, regarding what you mentioned, Mark, the problem is not with food and medicine. There's a lot of food and medicine that were brought into Gaza. The problem is the management, leadership, and the fact that Hamas takes the humanitarian aid and it doesn't come to the right places. So for that to change, we have to finish with Hamas. So in order to support the humanitarian efforts in Gaza, the goal is to finish with Hamas. So I think the international community should not condemn Israel for going after Hamas. They should support us on this initiative.
Right. Is a ceasefire with Hamas still a realistic possibility? It's been negotiated for weeks, months now, and it doesn't seem to be on the horizon. Many families of the hostages, and you know that, Mr. Danon, in Israel, are begging the government to finally cut a deal, have a ceasefire, and bring the remaining hostages home.
We pray for their release. We know that the conditions are unimaginable. We heard the testimonials from those who came back about the raping, the tortures. We were willing to accept the deals that were offered in May, in August. Unfortunately, whenever we think we have an agreement, Hamas comes with new terms. I don't think they really want to have an agreement with Israel, but we will continue to try. We will continue to speak with the negotiators in order to achieve a ceasefire.
So there's still a little hope for that.
We will do everything in our power, both militarily, but also diplomatically, to bring those hostages back home. Every morning we wake up and we think about them, and we will not stop. Many colleagues tell me when the war will end. It will end when the hostages will come back home.
Danny Danon, I want to thank you very much for appearing here on France 24 from New York, and thank you all for watching this interview here on France 24.